I have no idea why Fossabot timed out the stream elements bot. There were not that many symbols in my title. I am confused. Alright. Oh, sorry, the yawn came out of nowhere. Hello. Hello, how are we all doing today, chat? On this fine Saturday night. Today, we're going to be reading Chapter 8 of Nocturnal Animals, by Bones and the Bees. For those of you that don't know what Nocturnal Animals is, it is a fanfiction, a Crime Boys fanfiction, where Wilbur is a vampire and Tommy is a vampire hunter that spared Wilbur's life, and they start bonding. But the Academy finds out, and in this chapter we're gonna find out what happens next. Also, I think this fic has a total of 9 chapters. The 9th one hasn't been published yet, but it's supposed to have 9 chapters, unless this is the last one. So it's either gonna be reading Nocturnal Animals ends today for sure, or it's gonna end for a little bit until the next last chapter gets published. Now, if you're new to my stream and you like the content that you see, be sure to drop a follow, because at 100 followers I'm gonna be doing an entire stream in a British accent, so that's gonna be fun. And if you want to follow my other socials, you can hit !socials, and that'll show you my link tree that has all my other socials on it. Alright. Shall we begin? I think we shall. Chapter 8. The chase is on. Summary: the hunters are after them. Now, I want to say that, I have a theory for what's going to happen based on, subtle hints that were said in previous chapters. I think Tommy's going to get turned. I don't know if it's going to be of his own free will, of being like, I don't want to grow old and Wilbur not, and then I die and leave Wilbur alone. I want to be a vampire with him. Or if it's just going to be like he got turned by accident and it happened to be convenient kind of thing. But Tommy's definitely getting turned. Don't spoil! If you read it, don't confirm or deny. I want to find out for myself. This is just a theory based on common tropes in reading, such as foreshadowing. Oh, 1 second, I just realized my glasses are really dirty. I need to clean them. One second. There we go, that's better. Okay. Trigger warnings. Lots of talk about blood and blood drinking, fighting, injuries, literally just so much violence, and also vampire stuff. Vampire stuff. Such as getting turned? Okay, no, I Wilbur wasn't sure what to do. Tommy was panicking, running around the apartment and chucking shit into a backpack as he rambled on about having to run and how they should have had a backpack plan ready. Meanwhile, Wilbur felt like a stone pillar in a turbulent sea. Tommy was a whirlwind, while Wilbur was still struggling to process how things had gone wrong so quickly. When Tommy had left for patrol earlier that day, nothing had been out of the ordinary. But now apparently the Academy knew about Wilbur, and they were coming to hunt him down. Dream fucking cornered me after my patrol, Tommy was explaining after he grabbed a handful of cash between the pages of a history book Wilbur had never opened before. I had no clue what the hell was going on, but he and George didn't say shit and just dragged me to Sam's office. So even Sam knows about me? Wilbur asked, folding a spare pair of clothes as small as he could to shove into his own backpack. Tommy nodded. Dream told him. It's all him. He noticed I was acting weird and decided the only reasonable solution was to fucking stalk me, which, how creepy is that? And he noticed that you lived with me and didn't know why I'd have a roommate, so he just kept following us and just figured out you were a vampire through that. Shit, Wilbur muttered, frowning as he wrapped one of his wine bottles in a thick sweatshirt and put it in a bag. How did you get away? I doubt they'd let you come warn me. Pausing his packing, Tommy bit the inside of his cheek and looked at the ground. Took him by surprise, he muttered. Wilbur had the sense of mind not to ask what Tommy meant by that. So where do you think we should go? Wilbur asked, zipping up his bag. Tommy frowned. I'm not sure. If we can lose the hunters, we can probably hide out at Nikki's, but I don't want to lead them to her. We focus on losing them first, then? Swinging his own bag over his shoulder, Tommy nodded. Yeah, that'll be our first priority. Fuck. Okay. They just had to run until they made sure the hunters couldn't find them. Couldn't it be that hard, right? As Tommy did one final sweep over the apartment, his face grim and filled with fear, Wilbur couldn't stop the guilt from burning in his chest. It was his fault that Tommy had to run. He's the reason Tommy was losing the main connections he had to the organization that basically raised him. Before Tommy could open the door, Wilbur rested a hand on his shoulder. Tommy. Turning around, Tommy blinked at him. What? Look, He took a shaky breath. I know you're probably not going to agree with this, but have you considered that it might just be easier to... Don't fucking finish that sentence, Tommy hissed, grabbing the front of his shirt to cut him off. If you're going to say I should turn you over, then shut the hell up, because that's not happening. Wilbur sighed. But Tommy, you've been with the hunters for years. They're your family. Do you really want to give all that up just for me? Narrowing his eyes, Tommy let go of his shirt and shoved him back half a step. You are my family, Wilbur, not the hunters. Not anymore. Blinking fast, Wilbur nodded. Okay, if you're sure, I'm sure. Turning back, Tommy unlocked the door and took a deep breath. You ready? This was it. A moment of truth. I'm ready. With one more nod, Tommy swung open the door. Then let's go. The two sprinted out the door and down the stairs to the front of the apartment building. As soon as they burst through the front step, there was a flurry of shouting and several people in black uniforms similar to Tommy's own. Tommy cursed and grabbed Wilbur's hand, yanking him the opposite direction and down the street. It was then Wilbur remembered the potion bottle swishing around his pocket, and he used his free hand to pull it out and handed it to Tommy. Drink that! Wilbur said. Eyes widening with realization, Tommy pulled off the cork to the bottle and downed the glittering liquid in one gulp. He stumbled for a moment, Wilbur catching him before he could fall, and the footsteps behind them grew louder as the potion worked its way into Tommy's body. Then, Tommy straightened up and nodded at Wilbur before he was off like a bullet. Now Wilbur could run at full speed, not holding himself back for Tommy's sake because Tommy could keep up with him. The potion would only last a few minutes, but hopefully that would be enough to get them a solid head start on the hunters. Couldn't he have just grabbed Tommy and then ran? I don't know. The two sprinted down the street, their boots slamming against the concrete and echoing off the walls of the buildings around them. Wilbur let Tommy lead, following him as they darted into the maze of alleyways that were hidden in the shadows from the main streets. Right turn, left turn, right turn. Wilbur's head was spinning as he wondered if Tommy knew where the hell he was even going, or if they were just trying to lose the hunters on their tails. Behind them, Wilbur could still hear footsteps that were far too close for comfort, meaning that they still hadn't lost them yet. More turns. They stumbled into a T-shaped intersection, and Tommy's eyes darted from side to side, struggling to figure out which way to go. Wilbur, meanwhile, had spent enough time living in the alleys during his year on his own to know that if they went right, they would just be closer to the academy instead of getting away from it. So Wilbur grabbed Tommy's hand and pulled him to the left, and Tommy didn't argue as he let Wilbur take the lead. Wilbur wasn't sure where he was going. All he knew was that they needed to get away from the academy, as far away as possible. They ran back onto the main road for a brief moment, only to cross over into an alleyway on the other side. Behind them, Wilbur could still hear footsteps, and wondered who the hell was chasing them at this point. Then, all at once, Tommy tripped over his own feet. He didn't fall, but when he tried to run again, he was back at the pace of a normal human. Fuck! I thought that would have lasted for 2 more minutes, Wilbur exclaimed, wondering where the hell he went wrong with the potion. Do you have another one? Tommy asked, hands on his knees as he gasped for air. No. Wilbur hadn't thought to grab more than 1 potion each. There was a healing potion still sitting in his pocket, while the sleep potion was nestled at the bottom of his backpack, even though that one certainly wasn't going to be of any use for them right now. Shit. Here, can you carry 2 backpacks at once? Wilbur asked, already tugging his backpack off. Tommy frowned, his chest still heaving as he straightened up. I don't think that's gonna help me run any faster, dumbass. No, you fucking... Sighing, Wilbur crouched down and pointed at his back. I'm gonna carry you! There was a beat as Tommy blinked at him. I literally don't even think you could carry me, let alone while I'm wearing 2 fucking backpacks. Tommy, seriously? We gotta go, Wilbur insisted. Nervously glancing back towards the street, Tommy bounced on his toes as he internally debated with himself. Then, he seemed to make a decision, and huffed as he hurried to hop on Wilbur's back. But before he could even put his hands on Wilbur's shoulders, there was another voice. Don't move! 1 second. There we go. Whipping his head around, Wilbur sucked in a sharp breath when he saw a hunter standing less than 10 feet away from them. He had dark hair tied back with a white bandana, and was wearing the same hunter's uniform that all of them wore. But there was something off about him. Something Wilbur couldn't name. But at the moment, he was pointing a crossbow at both of them, so that was more of Wilbur's primary concern for the time being. Dropping the backpacks onto the ground, Tommy immediately stepped in front of Wilbur, using one hand to push him back. Sapnap, you don't have to do this. The hunter, Sapnap apparently, narrowed his eyes. Tommy, don't make this any harder than it has to be. It doesn't have to be hard at all, Tommy insisted. The others probably aren't going to catch up for a few minutes. You can let us go. Sapnap huffed. Why would I do that? Because Wilbur's like you, Tommy said, making Wilbur and Sapnap stiffen at the same time. He doesn't want to hurt people. That doesn't change what he is, Sapnap hissed, lifting the crossbow higher. Doesn't change what you are either, Tommy told him. And suddenly, Wilbur understood. Tommy had mentioned a hunter who had been turned. This hunter moved just a little too quickly, his eyes darting around slightly faster than a human could. He wasn't human. This was another vampire. Shut up, Tommy, Sapnap growled. Putting his hands up in surrender, Tommy took a step forward. Wilbur doesn't hurt anyone to feed. There are blood dealers out there who pay humans to willingly donate. Yeah, right, Sapnap scoffed. If that existed, the hunters would have found them by now. But they do exist, Tommy insisted. I promise I'm not bullshitting you. If Wilbur was going around killing humans, I would have killed him long ago. Even if they do exist, what does it matter? Sapnap asked, his eyes narrowing with challenge. Why the hell are you bringing it up to me? Tommy took another step forward. Because your best friend doesn't seem to know how to deal with what you are, he said in a low voice. Because all of the hunters look at you differently than they did before. Like you're a threat. Another step. Because you stalk the halls of the academy like you're already a ghost. Like you died in that fight instead of getting turned. Because I did die! Sapnap shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. I died, and now I have fucking eternity sitting in front of me when I'm something that I don't even want to be! The words sounded so familiar to Wilbur. The idea of this eternity he didn't want sitting in front of him, ripping away his chance for the life he expected to live, and now forced to deal with the kind of life he hated the most. Sapnap? Wilbur cut in, ignoring Tommy's attempts to push behind him as Sapnap's head snapped towards him. I know you don't know me, but I know you. I know what you're feeling right now, and it's not fucking fun. Sapnap's eyes narrowed. I have nothing in common with you, bloodsucker. Despite his attempts to sound angry, his voice broke on the word bloodsucker, and Wilbur didn't react to the insult. I think we're more alike than you realize, Wilbur argued, holding his hands up by his head. I think we've both laid in our beds, staring at the ceiling because we don't sleep as much as we did when we were human, but desperately wishing we could, because not thinking is so much easier than everything else. I think we've both felt that burn in our throats and let ourselves go too long without feeding, because if it hurts, we're not hurting others. If the thirst is there, that means we're doing good and pretending to be human, because we're not letting the monster win. At his words, Sapnap flinched, and Wilbur noticed the crossbow in his hands begin to shake. Trust me, I know how you feel, Wilbur continued. I've been there. Hell, I'm still there sometimes. And because of that, I know you're going to think this is bullshit when I tell you it can get better, but I mean it. What? Are you gonna tell me it gets better by giving in? Letting yourself become the monster? Sapnap asked, his words dripping with bitterness. Wilbur shook his head. It's still hard for me to reconcile with, but the monster is still you, Sapnap. I know it feels like the old you died and you're just his corpse shuffling around, but you're him and he's you. You just have to relearn how to be you. The anger had faded from Sapnap's dark eyes, and Wilbur noticed he was beginning to lower the crossbow. How am I supposed to do that? He asked, and this time the question sounded genuine. Tommy jumped back in to answer this time. Leave the academy. Go find a blood dealer, take Carl with you, and just leave all this shit behind, because the academy isn't going to be a home for you anymore. There was a tense moment of silence as Sapnap stared them both down, the crossbow shaking violently now. His eyes darted between Tommy and Wilbur, his shoulders drawn up while Wilbur could practically hear the gears turning in his mind. 1 beat. 2 beats. Then... Fucking hell, Sapnap muttered as he dropped the crossbow, twisting his fingers into his hair. Do you know where I could find a blood dealer? Oh, thank fuck. Tommy's jaw clenched. I can't tell you, but you can figure it out if you go looking. The Academy has looked into blood dealers before. You should start there. Nodding, Sapnap wrapped his arms around his chest. Carl has access to records like that, so I guess I can ask him. You should do it now while the others are out trying to hunt us, Tommy said, dropping his hands back down to his sides. You don't have much time though, so you should hurry. Yeah, shit, okay. Staring at the crossbow on the ground, Sapnap blinked a few times before kicking it across the concrete towards Tommy. You should take that. You're gonna need it. Letting out a sigh of relief, Tommy bent down to pick up the crossbow. Thanks, Sapnap. Something determined flashed over Sapnap's face as he took a step back from the two of them. Try not to die, kid. I'll do my best. Tommy nodded, flashing him a grin. With one last nod, Sapnap took a deep breath before disappearing into a blur of color. And just like that, he was gone from the alley, leaving Wilbur and Tommy alone. Holy shit, Wilbur whispered, staring at his hands. You actually talked down a hunter. How the fuck did... We both talked him down. Tommy cut in, putting the crossbow strap over his head so it hung on his chest. Sapnap's a good guy. I just hope he can find a blood dealer on his own. I think he'll figure it out. Wilbur hummed as he watched Tommy put both backpacks on his back again. But we should keep moving. Yeah, definitely. Hoisting both backpacks onto his shoulder with a loud grunt, Tommy prepared to jump onto Wilbur's back again. Wilbur crouched down, ready to catch his weight. But once again, before they could, something else interrupted them. There was slow clapping echoing through the alley. Wilbur's eyes darted over to where Sapnap had been standing before, his heart leaping into his throat when he saw a new uniformed figure walk out from behind the wall and into the light. This man had a white mask covering the lower half of his face, with a smiley face drawn over it. He was practically dripping in weaponry, and when Wilbur met his piercing green eyes, his breath caught in his throat because he recognized those eyes. The hunter was the guy who had been waiting outside Tommy's apartment the day Wilbur had been preparing for his birthday. If he was a hunter, Tommy said his mentor Dream had been watching them. Shit. This must be a dream then. Well done, Tommy, Dream declared, mockery lacing his words. I was sure that Sapnap wasn't going to break, but you really managed to fill his head with enough bullshit that he thinks he can leave the academy now. Oh, fuck. Tommy, who had dropped the backpacks a second time and was now shoving Wilbur behind him with even more aggression than he had before, bared his teeth at the older hunter. Were you listening to us the whole time? Not the whole time, but I heard enough, Dream said, setting a hand over the knife sheath on his hip. Suddenly, those green eyes met Wilbur's own, and his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't enough for you to poison my protege with whatever lies you told him, but you had to go and fuck with Sapnap's head too, huh? Wilbur blinked, Uh, what? Dream scoffed. Don't play stupid, Wilbur. Tommy used to be the top hunter at the academy, second only to me. Then he meets you, and now he's suddenly defending vampires, fighting his own family just to keep some random bloodsucker alive? It doesn't make any sense unless you did something to him. What the hell could he even do? Tommy asked, frowning at Dream. You think he fucking mind controlled me or something? It sounds ridiculous, but what else am I supposed to think, Tommy? If this was 3 months ago, you would have never done something like this. Not in a million years. If I could mind control Tommy, he would have killed me the night we met, because that's what I asked him to do. Wilbur cut in, trying not to flinch when Dream's hardened gaze flickered back to him. So why didn't you kill him, Tommy? Dream asked. I told you already, I just couldn't. The fact that he was asking me to do it, that he wasn't even trying to fight back, it just... Tommy's breathing hitched. He's fucking human, Dream. Vampires aren't these horrible monsters you say they all are. They're just people. Harsh, grating laughter bounced between the brick walls and shoved itself into Wilbur's ears, making him wince. Oh, Tommy, Dream began, his voice a low croon. You poor kid. You've really been tricked by him, haven't you? He's made you think he actually feels things? That he has the capacity to care about you? He does. Tommy shot back without a second of hesitation. I know he does. Vampires feel things just like we do. Hell, you can literally just talk to fucking Sapnap and tell that he's still the same person he was. The Sapnap that I was friends with is dead. Dream snapped, his words cracking through the air like a whip. You proved that to me when you convinced him to leave the academy. He's not dead, you fucking shithead! He's your best friend and he's been living through hell these past few months, and you can't bring yourself to give a shit because of what he needs to eat. Sapnap is dead to me, and his shambling corpse will be dead soon too when I go find him at the academy, Dream said, unsheathing the dagger on his hip. But before that, I have to take care of your pet bloodsucker here. Something like a snarl clawed its way out of Tommy's chest as he leveled the crossbow at Dream's head. If you try to hurt him, I'll fucking kill you. Again, there was that harsh and painful laugh scraping its way out of Dream's throat. Go ahead, he declared, holding his arms out wide. Shoot me, Tommy! I dare you! And, well, Wilbur really shouldn't have been surprised when Tommy immediately fired off a shot. The arrow flew at Dream, but in a blur of movement, Dream caught the arrow in his hand, with the silver arrowhead only centimeters from his forehead. Wilbur sucked in a sharp breath as he stumbled backwards, while Tommy only cursed and tossed the crossbow to the side. He never got around to teaching me how to do that, Tommy grumbled, taking out his own dagger from his pocket. Wilbur, stay back. He then added as he dropped into a fighting stance, several sigils on his arm glowing as they activated. Dream matched the stance, and the two began to circle each other. For a moment, neither of them made a move. Then, Tommy lunged, and the fight was on. Anxiety clawed gouges into Wilbur's chest as he watched the two go at it. It was like the most terrifying dance he'd ever watched. Tommy would swing right as Dream would dodge, and then Dream would lunge and Tommy would step back. They were in perfect harmony, matching the rhythm of their swings and hits as they danced around and around and around. But it wasn't a dance, and Wilbur knew this. He knew that each swing of Dream's blade could cut through Tommy's skin. That one wrong move could lead to Tommy's death. Drink break. With a loud shout, Tommy lunged at Dream. At the last second, though, Dream twisted out of the way, grabbing Tommy by the arm and swinging him into the wall. Tommy cried out as Dream pinned him, his legs scrabbling for purchase as Dream lifted him up by the throat. All of his sigils were glowing now, and his eyes were wide with panic as his face began to lose its color. Right as Wilbur took a step forward to help, Tommy kicked out, catching Dream in the chest and sending him into the opposite wall. Tommy collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as he scrambled to his feet. Then, he launched himself at Dream again, sending them both to the ground, only a few feet away from Wilbur. Tommy rolled over, trying to pin Dream on the concrete. But Dream grabbed Tommy by the hair, shoving him off and slamming his head down with enough brute force to make Wilbur gasp. Then, as Tommy struggled to push himself up again, Dream crawled forward to grab something only a few feet in front of him. The crossbow. Sapnap's crossbow that Tommy had dropped when he realized he couldn't use it against Dream. Wilbur didn't realize what Dream was doing with it until it was too late, the hunter loading the arrow and lining Wilbur up in his sights. If Wilbur had a heartbeat, he knew it would be pounding in his ears right now. He had stopped breathing when the fight began, and the icy fear raced through his veins. In the past, Wilbur had never understood the expression, standing like a deer in headlights. But now, as he faced down the headlights of Dream's crossbow, he understood it all too well. He couldn't move. All he could do was stare at the arrow as it was launched into the air, the gleaming silver tip aimed straight for his chest. Death should have felt like coming home to an old friend, given how Wilbur had spent so much time longing for it. But as he watched death stare him down from the flying arrow, he didn't feel like he was coming home to something familiar at all. Instead, all he felt was regret. And then, there was something slamming into him. Wilbur was shoved to the ground right before the arrow could reach him. His hand smacked against concrete, and he gasped, all of the air being knocked out of his lungs in one fell swoop. Thankfully, he didn't need to breathe, but it was still a startling experience. Wait, hold on. His hand smacked against the concrete, so he was pushed forward. Obviously, Tommy did it, but... Hold on. So... I'm trying to, think about, where Tommy was in all of this, and how he got behind Wilbur, but I don't know. Then, Wilbur whipped his head to where he'd just been standing, and a black pit opened up in the center of his chest when he saw what, or rather who, knocked him out of the way. Tommy. Stupid, reckless, compassionate Tommy was standing right where Wilbur had been only a second before. He was staring into space, his hands drifting up to his chest. Wilbur's eyes followed his hand, and the pit in his chest screamed out when he saw the bright arrow sticking out of Tommy's shirt. Tommy! Wilbur screamed, scrambling to his feet and catching Tommy before he could fall to the ground. His knees had given out from under him, and Wilbur did his best to lower Tommy down as gently as he could. You know, Tommy said, his voice hoarse as blood bubbled up past his lips. Getting shot in the chest doesn't hurt as much as you think it would. Before Wilbur could even try to think of a response to that, there were footsteps behind him, followed by a wholly unwelcome voice. Oh fuck, Dream muttered, stumbling back when his eyes fell on the arrow sticking out of Tommy's chest. Fuck, no! Tommy, you weren't supposed to... I didn't want to hurt you! Tommy was shot. Tommy was shot in the chest. Dream had shot Tommy. Tommy was going to die, and it was all Dream's fault. Wilbur couldn't breathe. He couldn't even see as his vision blurred, a burning pain beginning to form in the place where his heart should have been. Instead of icy fear, every molecule in his body was filled with fire. The scent of Tommy's blood was clouding his head, and all he could focus on was dream, dream, dream. 1 second, Wilbur was crouched by Tommy. The next, he was on his feet and slammed Dream into the brick wall of the alley with strength he didn't know he possessed. "Look what you fucking done!" Wilbur screamed, digging his nails into Dream's shoulders as hard as he could. "Are you proud of yourself? Is this what you wanted?" Before, Dream had been nothing but arrogance and rage. Now, his eyes were wide and full of unfiltered panic. "No! I didn't want to hurt him. I was trying to... You've killed him!" Wilbur shouted, his voice somewhere between a scream and a sob. "You've killed Tommy!" As the words left his mouth, the truth of it really hit Wilbur all at once. A crossbow to the chest wasn't something you could recover from. Tommy was almost certainly going to die in the next few minutes, and his killer was standing right in front of Wilbur. The smell of Tommy's blood was hanging heavily in the air. It was clouding his mind, reminding him over and over that Tommy's dying, Tommy's dying, Tommy's dying. Between his clouded thoughts, rage boiled in his veins and the burning in his throat demanded vengeance. His grip on Dream's shoulders tightened, and he found himself tugging Dream forward without thinking about what he was doing. He slammed Dream against the wall again. He slammed Dream back against the wall again. And again, and again. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Tommy was dying, and it was Dream's fault, and he needed to scream, needed to shatter something, needed to feed something to the angry thing clawing inside his chest. And then, Dream collapsed to the ground. The back of his head was covered in blood where it had hit the bricks over and over, and his eyes were glassy where they stared at the wall. From here, Wilbur could hear that Dream's heart wasn't beating. He was dead. Wilbur had killed someone. Again. For a moment, horror washed over him as he stared at the blood on his hands, wondering what the hell he'd just done. But before he could break down completely, he heard a whimper come from the other side of the alley, and everything else in his mind got shoved to the side as he remembered that Tommy's heart was still beating, at least for these last few minutes. "Tommy, fuck, shit, Did you kill him, Will?" Tommy asked in a hoarse voice. Blood having stained the front of his shirt while Wilbur was off dealing with Dream. Wilbur clenched his jaw, the pit in his chest growing larger. "Yes, I did." Tommy huffed, a bit more blood spilling from his mouth at the sound. "While I don't advocate murder, I think he kind of deserved it." There was so much blood. So much blood. The smell was thick and cloying, not something that was tempting to Wilbur in the slightest because he knew it was Tommy's. More than anything, it just made his stomach twist in disgust because Tommy shouldn't be bleeding. He shouldn't be dying. "I'm sorry," Wilbur whispered, hot tears spilling over his cheeks. I should have fucking moved out of the way or gotten further away to you so you shouldn't have." "Don't blame yourself," Tommy told him, having to force the words out of his throat. "You do that way too fucking much." The healing sigil on Tommy's arm was glowing brighter than Wilbur had ever seen it before, but it didn't seem to be slowing the spread of blood. Suddenly, though, Wilbur remembered the healing potion on his jacket pocket, and hope sparked inside of him as he reached in to grab it, only to be met with wet glass shards instead of a potion bottle. Fuck. Yeah, keeping it in his pocket probably wasn't the best idea. The hope died out as quickly as it appeared, and another sob tore through Wilbur's chest. From the ground, Tommy's brows furrowed together. What's wrong? Besides you dying? Wilbur asked, sniffling weakly. I had a healing potion in my pocket, but it broke when I was beating the shit out of Dream. The crease between Tommy's brows smoothed out again. Probably wouldn't have done much anyway, he muttered, his words barely above a whisper now. Reaching out, Wilbur grabbed Tommy's limp hand and winced at how cold his fingers were. Still, Tommy tried his best to squeeze his hand, although his grip was barely anything. This isn't fucking fair, Wilbur whispered, squeezing his eyes shut. It sucks. Tommy coughed. I don't regret saving you, but He cut himself off, sucking in a sharp breath as tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. I'm not ready to die, Will. I'm not ready for you to die either, Wilbur confessed. God, I'm really not fucking ready. He wasn't ready, but he wasn't sure if he'd ever be ready. Wilbur had thought about the possibility that he and Tommy would stay friends until the end of his life, when Tommy would be old and gray while Wilbur would still be stuck at 23. Even after a whole lifetime, Wilbur had worried he wouldn't have been ready to say goodbye to his best friend, the brother who saved his life in so many ways. Suddenly, Tommy's eyes flew open. What if I didn't die? Tommy blinked, frowning at Tommy. What do you mean? I mean, you're a vampire. I'm a human. You can... The realization slammed into Wilbur like a truck. Tommy was saying Wilbur could turn him, save his life by damning him to the same eternity Wilbur had cursed 1,000 times over. Are you fucking crazy? Wilbur whispered, more tears streaming down his cheeks. I can't turn you. You don't want this kind of life. I don't want to die, though, Tommy said, more tears mixing with the blood on his face. But like this, you'll never die, Wilbur said, squeezing his hand. You'll be trapped like you are now for eternity, in a life of solitude. But I have my brother, Tommy pushed, staring him down even though his eyes were glazed and unfocused. Unless you plan on ditching me. What? No, of course I'd never... Then save me. Tommy was begging now, his words broken and fear making itself known in the hazy sheen over his blue eyes. Wilbur, please. I'm not ready. I don't want to die. Wilbur thought to hundreds of mornings he'd woken up wishing he hadn't, to staring at the eternity laid out in front of him, wondering what the whole point even was of moving forward if he was stuck as he was now for the rest of time. I can't put you through that, Wilbur said, pleading with Tommy to understand. I'm asking you to, Tommy repeated, desperation creasing the corners of his eyes. But what if you hate me? Wilbur asked, his words shattering across the ground. What if you hate me for turning you? I won't, Tommy told him, his eyes clearing up for just a moment to focus solely on his own. I promise. Wilbur was silent as he thought this over. Of course Wilbur didn't want Tommy to die, but the idea of Tommy facing the same pain he'd already been going through for the past year of his life? of seeing the same hopelessness that resided in his own dark eyes reflected in Tommy's. It was so painful to imagine, to see Tommy's spirits crushed by the weight of the eternity that would loom in front of him. But right now, there was so much fear in Tommy's eyes. Wilbur could hear his heartbeat slowing as he bled out right in front of him. He didn't have much time, and there was exactly one way Wilbur could help. Taking a deep breath, Wilbur brought his wrist up to his mouth and bit down on the delicate skin there. His own blood tasted bitter on his tongue, and he tried not to wince as he moved his wrist towards Tommy's mouth. "Drink," Wilbur told him. Tommy's eyes widened as he stared at the bloody wrist on his face, in front of his face. "Holy shit, I didn't think you'd actually agree. Just..." Wilbur winced, pushing his wrist closer. You're losing a lot of blood. Hurry!" There was a bit of apprehension in Tommy's eyes as Wilbur pressed his wrist to the boy's mouth. But as soon as the blood touched his tongue, all nerves faded away as his gaze clouded over, and he began to eagerly drink. The reason it was so easy to forcibly turn someone into a vampire was because of the fact that while vampire blood might taste bitter to another vampire, to humans it was nothing short of ambrosiac. Once they tasted a single drop, a frenzy would begin, and the human wouldn't be able to stop drinking until the vampire pulled away. Wilbur waited, wincing every so often when Tommy pulled at the wound on his wrist. He wasn't sure how much he was supposed to let Tommy drink, and decided to let his instincts guide him on this. After a few minutes of drinking, Wilbur got the feeling that it had been long enough, and he quickly pulled his wrist back. Tommy whined and tried to hold Wilbur's wrist to his face for more, but he could barely lift his arms from his injuries, so it wasn't hard for Wilbur to pull away. The wound quickly closed up, and without the blood, Tommy slumped back against the concrete. "So what happens now?" he asked, his eyes starting to droop. "All you have to do is fall asleep," Wilbur said, wiping some of the blood off his chin. Tommy nodded, relaxing even more as the pain left his body. Still, Wilbur could tell he was nervous. "I'm going to wake up again, right?" He would. Tommy would wake up with glimmering eyes and burning pain in his throat that would never fully go away. Wilbur knew that, and was already dreading the moment Tommy's mind wasn't clouded by pain. Because then Tommy would fully realize what he'd chosen. What Wilbur had done to him. "You'll wake up. I promise," Wilbur said, squeezing his hand. With one last attempt at a nod, Tommy's eyes fluttered shut. "Okay, I trust you will." And just like that, he was asleep. But before Wilbur did anything else, as soon as he was certain Tommy was deep in sleep, he pulled out the arrow that was still embedded into Tommy's chest. It couldn't heal properly with the arrow still inside, but he hadn't wanted to take it out while Tommy was awake because of how painful it would be. Once the arrow was out, Wilbur expected more blood to stain his shirt, but it didn't. That meant Wilbur's blood was already doing the work to turn him. Wilbur could hear that Tommy's heartbeat had slowed to only one beat every few seconds, and it wouldn't be long before it stopped beating entirely. Taking a shuddering breath, Wilbur pressed his blood-stained palms into his eyes, letting out a low groan as he tried to slow his racing thoughts. Tommy's pleading whispers echoed in his ears, while the sensation of slamming Dream into the wall over and over reverberated through his arms. He had killed Dream, and in a way, he'd killed Tommy too. All he could do now was hope that Tommy kept his promise and didn't hate his guts for what he'd done. This wasn't the time to worry about that, though. The other hunters had seemingly lost them, considering no one had appeared to help Dream, but if they stayed in the same place for much longer, it wouldn't take a lot to find them again. Wilbur needed a safe place to keep Tommy while he turned. That was his first priority. With a heaving grunt, Wilbur tugged both backpacks onto his shoulders, and then lifted Tommy into his arms. The boy was dead weight, body as limp as a rag doll as his head lolled against Wilbur's chest. Already he could feel his chest buzzing with something more than the dread and fear he'd been feeling before. It was hot, like the rage that had raced through him when he killed Dream, but it wasn't a burning fire. If anything, it was more like molten lava flowing inside of him, warping into something like protectiveness as he stared down at his little brother's sleeping face. Nothing was going to hurt Tommy again. Wilbur would make sure of it. Wilbur stumbled out of the alley, ignoring Dream's limp body, careful to keep into the shadows, even though the streets were empty at this time of night. He kept an eye out for any other hunters. Oh yeah, all of this happened at night. I forgot about that. He kept an eye out for any other hunters, but everything was silent as he made his way through the city, the only sounds being the echoing of his own footsteps and the slow, steady beating of Tommy's heart. The longer he walked, the more he became aware of a thick haze enveloping his thoughts. He needed to find a safe place for Tommy, had to protect him from anyone else who would try to hurt him. He had to keep everyone else away from his fledgling. Wait, his fledgling? Did he seriously just think of Tommy as his fledgling? Well, that's what he was now, right? Wilbur had turned him, so Tommy was his fledgling. His brother, not just in a promise, but bound by blood. Ooh, that's cool! That is so cool! I'm sorry. I love that. That wording! I love wording, I love reading, I love books. Sorry. God, I'm such a nerd. He kept walking. The journey felt like it took hours, but it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes before roses and sugar came into view. Picking up the pace, Wilbur ignored the black spots dancing around his vision as he rushed to the front, silently pleading with every force in the universe that Nikki was there. Holding Tommy with one arm, Wilbur pounded his fist against the door, anxiety building up inside of him like claws ripping into him once again. He was too exposed out here. Wilbur had to hide. He had to curl up with Tommy in the dark until he was ready to wake up. Wilbur let out a pained noise of relief when he saw Nikki's pink hair appear behind the counter. She rushed to the door, swinging it open before sucking in a sharp breath as her gray eyes landed on the two of them. Wilbur was sure they were quite the sight. Tommy unconscious and covered in blood. Wilbur also covered in blood, but none that was his own. "Hunters?" Nikki asked after a moment of shocked silence. Wilbur nodded. "They're not following us right now, but they might still be looking." Immediately, Nikki opened the door wider, gesturing for the two to come in. Once Wilbur did, she locked the door and began to rush around in a blur as she shut all the blinds to make sure no one could see inside. With that done, Nikki stopped in front of them both, her eyes darting between the two of them. "I have first aid supplies here, but it looks like he's lost a lot of blood. You don't need to worry about patching him up," Wilbur told her, ducking his head to look at the ground. A heavy silence settled between them like a cloud. Wilbur refused to look up, to meet Nikki's gaze and see the expression on her face, because he was terrified of what it would be. "What do you mean by that, Wilbur?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. Wilbur was silent. "What did you do?" she continued when Wilbur didn't reply. Resisting the urge to curl in on himself, Wilbur swallowed down the lump in his throat. He asked me to do it, he confessed. I didn't want to do this to him, but he was dying and begged me to turn him, and he was so scared, Nikki. There was another moment of quiet before Nikki let out a soft sigh. Shit, she whispered, and Wilbur worked up the courage to lift his head and saw her shaking her head. This is a problem. I know you don't like him, but Nikki, please, we need help, and this has nothing to do with that. Nikki cut him off. If Tommy's a vampire now, that's fine. That's between the two of you. I don't care. There was something unsaid in her eyes that made Wilbur feel like a child waiting to be scolded by a parent. What's the problem then? Nikki pursed her lips, glancing between the two of them and the door to the kitchen behind the counter. How long ago did you turn him? Wilbur frowned. Maybe half an hour ago. Why? Cursing under her breath, Nikki reached out to grab one of the backpacks off his shoulder, before wrapping an arm around his wrist and dragging him towards the counter. Listen closely, and I'll explain as we walk. Where are we going? Wilbur asked as Nikki led them into the kitchen. There's a small apartment above the bakery that Jack stays in. You both can stay there while he turns, Nikki explained, firmly shutting the door behind her before leading him to the back of the kitchen. Sure enough, on the opposite side of the wall from the entrance to the walk-in freezer that led to the wine cellar, there was another door. Unlike the freezer, which had a heavy padlock on it, this door was unlocked, and Nikki opened it to reveal a set of stairs leading up. Okay, here's the problem, Nikki began as they climbed up the stairs. Technically, a fledgling can turn a human if they're at least a year old, which you are, but you're not supposed to turn a human until you're past the fledgling stage, or else it has, some side effects. They reached the top of the stairs, revealing a small but quaint living room decorated with a couch, a coffee table, and a TV that was turned off at the moment. There was a small kitchenette that looked as though it hadn't been used in months, and then two other doors which Wilbur presumed led to the bedroom and bathroom. Jack! Nikki called out, dropping the backpack on the ground and letting go of Wilbur's wrist. Get out here! There was some shuffling on the other side of one of the doors, and within seconds, Jack appeared in the doorway with drooping eyes, as if he'd been asleep. Nikki, Will? What the fuck is going on? And then his eyes fell on Tommy, and he straightened up as if he'd been slapped. Wait, what the fuck happened to Tommy? They got chased by hunters, Tommy got hurt, and Wilbur turned him, Nikki explained, pushing the coffee table away from the couch. Will, put him on the couch. Doing as she said, Wilbur set Tommy down on the couch as gently as possible, dropping the other backpack to the ground. What are the side effects of me turning Tommy even though I'm a fledgling? Wilbur asked, crouching beside the couch and keeping a hand on Tommy's arm. Nikki stared at him for a moment as if she was struggling to figure out how to explain what was going on. After a beat, she sighed and folded her arms over her chest. Do me a favor and walk away from the couch. For some reason, Wilbur's anxiety jumped at that. What? Let go of Tommy's arm and walk to the other side of the room. It was an easy task. The living room was so small that the opposite wall to the couch was only a few feet away. But for some reason, the idea of separating himself from Tommy's side made fear lance through him. Still, Wilbur wasn't going to be stubborn about such a simple task. So he forced himself to his feet and took one step back from the couch. In his mind, the whispers from before rang out. No, don't leave, fledgling. Must protect. The pain in his chest got stronger, but he grit his teeth and lifted his leaden legs to take another step back. No, 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 no! Without even thinking about it, Wilbur rushed back to Tommy's side, the screaming in his head subsiding the second he put his hand on Tommy's shoulder again. His thoughts were even cloudier than before, terror pulsing through his body in the same way his heartbeat once did. Wilbur. Hearing a new voice say his name made him nearly jump out of his skin. He practically threw himself over Tommy, fear racing through him as he whipped his head around to see who was there. Nikki was staring at him with a mix of exasperation and exhaustion lining her gaze. His panicked breath slowed, remembering it was only her and Jack here, and Wilbur knew he could trust Nikki. Still, he didn't move off the couch, instead readjusting so Tommy's head was resting in his lap. Once he was able to breathe again, he met Nikki's eyes, knowing that if he could flush, he would be burning with embarrassment right then. Sorry, I don't know what came over me. Those are your sire instincts, Nikki explained. They're already starting to kick in, which isn't surprising given how close you two were before you turned him. For now, they're going to be even louder than usual because Tommy is most vulnerable while he's turning, but it's not going to be much better when he wakes up. The reason it's a problem for a fledgling to sire another fledgling is because you don't have the same level of control when it comes to your instincts that a fully mature vampire would, especially since you're a fledgling who never bonded with your own sire. Clenching his jaw, Wilbur shrunk back against the couch cushions. What does that mean then? Basically, you and Tommy are gonna have real bad separation anxiety for the next few years. Jack chimed in with a snort. Wilbur narrowed his eyes. What? Jack gave a simplified explanation, but he's right. Because you're too young to properly deal with your sire instincts, the two of you are going to have a much stronger sire-fledgling bond than most vampires would, which isn't necessarily a good thing. So are we just stuck like that now? Forever? Nikki shook her head. It'll gradually get better, but it's going to take a very long time before either of you will be able to separate without being sent into a panic. Not to mention, it's going to take longer for either of you to reach full maturity. How long? Wilbur asked. For a normal fledgling, it takes about 3 years on average for them to reach full maturity. But because you turned Tommy while you were still a fledgling, the strain on your body and mind is going to set you back, so it'll take you 5 to 6 years before you mature, and it will be the same for Tommy. Well, that would have been good to know beforehand. But then again, it's not like there's anything Wilbur could have done. Tommy was dying, and he wouldn't have had time to bring him to Nikki so she could turn him instead. Even though this only gave Tommy more fuel to hate Wilbur for what he did, at the very least, he did what Tommy asked and saved his life. I'm sorry, Wilbur said, although he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. I know this isn't your problem, but we had nowhere else to go. Immediately, the pinched look on Nikki's face softened. You don't need to apologize, Will. I'm sorry you got put in that position in the first place. Taking a breath to try and steady himself, Wilbur's eyes fell back down to Tommy. The blood had dried on his chin, and despite the pain he'd been in before, now he seemed as peaceful as could be. Something warm and full of relief swelled inside of him despite all his other worries. Tommy was alive. He was alive, and they had gotten away from the hunters, at least for the time being. He wasn't going to lose his little brother. That alone was enough to make him smile. "How long until he wakes up?" he asked, absently running a hand through Tommy's hair. "It depends. Could be anywhere between a few hours to a full day, but since he was so badly injured, it's probably going to be on the longer side," Nikki told him, pushing her hair back from her face. "Jack and I need to start getting ready to open the bakery for the day, but I'm going to bring up a wine bottle soon for you. You need to drink the entire thing before Tommy wakes up." Wilbur winced at the idea of drinking that much blood in one day. Why? "Because you're already weakened from turning Tommy, and when he wakes up he's going to need to drink from you, because sire blood is better for a fledgling than human blood. Got it?" Frowning, Wilbur nodded. "Fine, I'll drink it." For the first time all morning, Nikki flashed him a small smile. "Jack and I will check in on you throughout the day. Just yell if you need anything, okay?" Wilbur nodded, and Nikki stepped towards the stairs like she was going to leave. At the last second, though, she paused and turned to walk over to the couch. Bending down, she hugged Wilbur for where he was sitting down, resting her chin on top of his head. "I'm really glad you're okay," she whispered into his hair. With Nikki's warm arms wrapped around him, Wilbur let out a shuddering breath and buried his face in her shoulder. "I killed him," he admitted, the words slipping out of his mouth unbidden. "I killed the hunter that did this to Tommy." Making a sympathetic noise, Nikki pulled back, resting a hand on Wilbur's cheek. "You did what you had to do," she told him, her piercing gray eyes meeting his own. "You were protecting someone you love." Despite knowing that Nikki's words were true, the guilt was swirling around like a toxic cloud, choking him from the inside out. "I don't want to be a murderer," he whispered in a broken voice. "Then don't do it again." And with that, Nikki was straightening up and heading down the stairs. Jack nodded at him before following her down. And then, Wilbur was alone with Tommy. So much had happened. So much was different now. Wilbur had no idea where he and Tommy were going to go from here, or what Tommy was going to say when he woke up. But for now, they were safe. His little brother was safe, and all Wilbur had to do for the time being was keep an eye on him until he woke up. Settling further into the couch, Wilbur tipped his head back to stare at the ceiling, and waited. Okay. I struggled so hard writing the Sapnap conversation, but he deserves to get out of there. Since Dream is the only one who overheard the conversation and he's obviously dead now, no one shows up to stop Sapnapping Carl, so the two of them are gonna get out safely. Just thought I'd clarify that. Oh, thank God. Sapnap is gonna be fine. Woo! And Carl, obviously. No real schedule for this. Don't know when I'll post the last one. Make sure to subscribe and keep an eye out. I think I've already subscribed, so. Okay. Whew! God damn, this is so good. I want to read the next chapter, but one, there is no next chapter yet, and two, I am tired. And I typically only read like one chapter of this because the chapters are so fucking long. Jesus Christ. Alright. I am going to end stream for the day. Whew. still can't believe Fossabot timed out my other bot. That's funny. Alright. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have work tomorrow, so I can't stream tomorrow. Monday, we'll see. And since I probably won't read anything else until the last chapter of Nocturnal Animals comes out, the next stream will probably be a Minecraft stream. It's been a while since I've done that. I want to get back into the groove of things, you know? Excuse me. Jesus. Alright. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.